The road stretched endlessly before the sleek black Tesla, its tires humming softly against the cracked asphalt of a forgotten highway. Elon Musk sat in the back, his eyes tracing the blur of barren fields and sagging billboards outside the window. It was April 28th, 2025, and the world spun on its relentless axis. Stock markets churned, Starlink satellites blinked in orbit, and X buzzed with a million voices clamoring for attention. But inside the car, there was only silence, heavy and unyielding, broken only by the faint tap of his fingers against the armrest. Elon wasn't a man prone to introspection. His mind was a machine, always calculating, always projecting forward, next quarter, next launch, next frontier. Faith, to him, was a relic of a slower era, something for those who hadn't seen the universe through a telescope or coded their own reality. Yet today, something felt off, like a gear slipping in a perfectly engineered system. He'd just left a Neuralink facility in rural Ohio. The meeting had been brisk, efficient, but when it ended early, he didn't want to rush back to the private jet waiting in Columbus. Drive, he'd told his driver, a wiry ex-Marine named Carl who knew better than to ask questions. Just drive. The Tesla wound through a patchwork of small towns, each one clinging to life with a mix of defiance and decay. Rusted grain silos loomed like sentinels over empty lots, and diners advertised pie specials to no one in particular. Elon's phone vibrated incessantly, emails from engineers, alerts from X, a text from his mother about dinner next week, but he ignored it. His gaze drifted to a small stone church on the edge of a gravel lot, its steeple chipped and weathered, a faded sign reading Hope Community Church, barely legible. The parking lot was empty, the gate ajar. Without thinking, he spoke. "Stop here." Carl glanced back, one eyebrow raised. "Here, sir." The question hung in the air, but Elon was already unbuckling his seatbelt. "I'll be quick," he said, stepping out before Carl could protest. The cold spring air hit him like a slap, sharp and grounding. His security detail, trailing in a second car, scrambled to respond, but Elon waved them off. "Stay put," he called, his voice firm but distracted. The church door groaned as he pushed it open, its hinges protesting the intrusion. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old wood and wax, the kind of stillness that seemed to absorb sound. Dim light filtered through cracked stained glass windows, casting jagged patterns of red and blue across the scuffed pews. The altar was simple, adorned with a single brass cross and a cluster of unlit candles. No one was there, no preacher, no congregation, just the faint creak of the building settling into its own history. Elon stood at the threshold, his breath shallow, unsure why he'd come. He could leave, return to the car, to the jet, to the life that moved at his command, but his feet carried him forward, boots echoing softly against the stone floor. He slid into the last pew, the wood cold against his palms. For a moment, he just sat, elbows on his knees, staring at the altar. His mind, usually a torrent of ideas and contingencies, was strangely quiet. He didn't pray. He wouldn't know where to start. But he felt something stir, a memory of being young, of lying awake in Pretoria, wondering if the universe had a purpose or if it was just a vast, indifferent machine. The thought made his chest ache, a dull, unfamiliar pain. Then he noticed him, a man, maybe in his late 50s, sitting a few pews ahead. He wore a faded flannel shirt and jeans, his hands clasped loosely in his lap, head bowed slightly. The man hadn't reacted when Elon entered, but now he turned, his face weathered but kind, with deep lines etched around his eyes. Their gazes met, and Elon felt a jolt, not recognition, but something deeper, like the man saw through the layers of fame and ambition to the raw, uncertain core beneath. The man stood, moving with the slow deliberateness of someone who'd carried heavy loads for years, and approached Elon's pew. In his hand was a small notebook, its cover worn to a soft gray, pages curling at the edges. "You look like you're carrying the world," the man said, his voice low with a faint Midwestern drawl. He held out the notebook. "This helped me when I was lost. Maybe it'll help you. Elon took it, his fingers brushing the rough cover. I don't do this, he said, gesturing vaguely at the church. I'm just passing through. The man smiled, not condescendingly, but with a quiet understanding. Doesn't matter. You're here now. He paused, then added, Name's Tom. Used to run a hardware store down the street. Lost it to the big chains a while back. Found something else instead. He nodded at the notebook. Read it when you're ready. Then he turned and walked out, his footsteps fading into the silence. Elon sat there, the notebook heavy in his hands. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he leaned back, letting the stillness settle over him. Minutes stretched into an hour, maybe more. The world outside, the deadlines, the lawsuits, the endless noise, felt distant. Like a signal flipped open the notebook, a single page slipped out, landing on the pew. It was a handwritten note, the ink slightly smudged but legible. To those who've forgotten how to dream, may you find the courage to start again. The words hit him like a punch. Dreams. He'd built his life on them, hadn't he? Rockets to Mars, cars that defied physics, networks that rewired society. But somewhere along the way, the dreams had become plans, then obligations, then burdens. He'd stopped dreaming for wonder and started chasing for survival. He closed his eyes, the note clutched in his hand, and let the memory come. His grandmother's voice, soft and warm, telling him stories of constellations in the South African night. The stars don't care about your failures, Elon, she'd said. They just keep shining. When he stepped out of the church, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and gold. Carl stood by the Tesla, his face a mix of concern and confusion. Everything okay, sir? He asked. Elon nodded, the notebook tucked into his jacket. Change of plans, he said. Take me to my old house, the one in Toronto. Carl hesitated, then nodded and opened the door. The drive was long, winding through back roads and past flickering streetlights. Elon didn't speak, his mind replaying fragments of the day, the church, Tom's steady gaze, the note's simple truth. The Toronto house was modest, a 2-story brick home he'd rented in his early 20s while scraping together his first company. It looked smaller now, the paint chipped, the lawn overgrown. He stepped out, ignoring Carl's offer to wait nearby, and walked to the front gate. The air smelled of damp earth and distant rain. He rested his hand on the rusted metal, closing his eye. This was where he'd coded late into the night, where he'd dreamed of changing the world, not for fame, but because he believed it was possible. He'd been hungry then, not just for success, but for meaning. Opening the notebook again, he reread the note, then flipped through the pages. They were filled with Tom's handwriting, quotes, reflections, fragments of poetry. One entry caught his eye. The world doesn't need more builders. It needs more believers. Elon's throat tightened. He thought of his kids, their laughter, their questions he too often brushed aside. He thought of his team, the engineers who poured their lives into his vision, and the strangers on X who hung on to his every word. Had he been building for them, or for himself? He whispered, almost to himself, I'm sorry. It wasn't a prayer, not exactly, but it was honest. I'm sorry for forgetting. The stars were faint above, obscured by city lights, but he felt them watching, patient and eternal. Back in the Tesla, Carl asked, Airport now, sir? Elon shook his head. One more stop. There's a community center nearby. I want to see it. Carl didn't question it, though his expression said he was starting to wonder if his boss was unraveling. The community center was a low brick building, its windows glowing with warm light. A sign out front advertised a youth science fair, open to the public. Elon stepped inside, the notebook still in his pocket, and was met with a cacophony of voices. Kids explaining projects, parents cheering, volunteers handing out juice boxes. A girl, maybe 10, stood by a poster board covered in hand-drawn diagrams of a solar-peppered drone. Her name tag read Maya. She was explaining her project to a bored-looking judge when she spotted Elon. Her eyes widened, but she didn't squeal or freeze like most kids might. Instead, she marched over, her braids bouncing, and thrust out a flyer. You're Elon Musk, right? You should see my drone. It's not as cool as your rockets, but it's pretty awesome. Elon smiled, a real smile, not the one he used for cameras. Show me, he said. Maya led him to her display, talking a mile a minute about photovoltaic cells and battery efficiency. Her enthusiasm was infectious, unpolished, alive. When she finished, she hesitated, then pulled a small sketch from her backpack. A pencil drawing of a drone soaring past a starry sky. I drew this when I was 8, she said, suddenly shy. It's why I started this project. I wanted to make something that could touch the stars. Elon took the drawing, his fingers tracing the careful lines. This is better than anything I've built, he said quietly. Maya grinned, then ran off to grab her mom, leaving him standing there, the sketch in one hand, the notebook in his pocket. The judge approached, apologizing for the interruption, but Elon waved him off. She's the real deal, he said. Fund her project. I'll cover it. Later, as the Tesla sped toward the airport, Elon leaned back, the sketch and notebook on the seat beside him. The jet was waiting, his team already prepping for meetings in New York, investors, regulators, the usual gauntlet. But his mind was elsewhere, lingering on Maya's fearless curiosity, Tom's quiet wisdom, the church's stubborn silence. He opened the notebook again, finding another of Tom's entries. The smallest spark can light a world if you carry it with care. The flight was smooth, the cabin quiet except for the hum of engines. His aides were asleep, their laptops glowing with unfinished reports. Elon didn't touch his phone. Instead, he stared out at the clouds, silvered by moonlight, and let himself think, not about timelines or profits, but about the boy he'd been, the one who'd believed in miracles before he learned to build them. He thought of his grandmother, her stories, her faith in something bigger. He thought of his kids, and how he wanted them to see the stars, not just as destinations, but as wonders. When the jet landed, dawn was breaking over New York, the skyline sharp against a pale sky. His motorcade was ready, security buzzing with their usual efficiency, but Elon paused at the tarmac's edge, the cold air biting his face. Give me a minute, he told his team, and they stepped back, uncertain but obedient. He stood there, the notebook and sketch in his hands, and closed his eyes. Show me, he whispered, not to anyone in particular, just to the universe. Show me how to keep this alive. The city roared to life around him, but he moved through it differently now. Meetings were less about dominance, more about listening. He called his kids, not to check in, but to hear their stories. He wrote a letter to Maya's school, not just funding her project, but offering to mentor her class. On X, he posted less about triumphs and more about questions. What's the smallest thing that ever changed your world? The responses flooded in. Stories of kindness, of quiet moments, of sparks that refused to die. One evening, weeks later, he found himself back in a church. Not the one in Ohio, but a small one in Brooklyn, tucked between a bodega and a laundromat. It was a Wednesday service, sparsely attended, the air warm with candlelight. He sat in the back, anonymous in a hoodie, the notebook now a constant companion. A young woman, maybe 30, stood at the pulpit, sharing a story about losing her job but finding purpose in volunteering. Her voice was steady, not preachy, and when she finished, she lit a candle and invited others to do the same. Elon hesitated, then stood. He took a candle, its flame trembling as he carried it to the altar. He didn't speak. No grand speeches, no revelations. He just placed the candle among the others, its light blending into the glow. The woman smiled at him, not knowing who he was, and said, "Thanks for being here." He nodded, his throat tight, and returned to his pew. The world didn't stop for him. Rockets still launched, deals still closed, critics still shouted, but inside something had shifted, not with fanfare, but with the quiet certainty of a seed taking root. He wasn't chasing wonder anymore. He was tending it, in the questions he asked, the hands he shook, the moments he let himself be small. The notebook stayed with him, its pages slowly filling with his own notes, ideas, not for products, but for living. One morning he received a package from Maya's school. Inside was a new drawing, This time of him and her standing under a sky full of drones and stars. A note was attached, in her careful handwriting. Thanks for believing in me. Keep dreaming big. He framed it, not for his office, but for his home, where his kids could see it, where he could remember.